Hey, this is Sabrina, Monarch of Monarch Astrology and Magic of the Spheres podcast. Going to be talking to you in this video about the new moon solar eclipse in Aries. Even though it happened some hours ago, I still really wanted to share this, even if I'm late. And I'm going to be taking the angle about confidence, which is an Aries theme, and things that eclipse our confidence and how to understand that at a deeper level and take steps toward healing that and coming back into a vitalized relationship with our confidence. So, why I'm getting that, it's not just an Aries thing. It's a, I'm looking at, here we have, ignore the house placements, by the way, because it's just a local chart. But we have the new moon eclipse, this solar eclipse in 9 degrees of Aries. It is a partial eclipse because, as you can see, it is a little bit far away from that north node from the ecliptic in Pisces and Virgo. But the ruler of this lunation is Mars in Cancer, who is in a trine to the Pisces stellium, Saturn, North Node, Venus, and Neptune in Pisces. So that water sign trine between Mars and Cancer and Saturn and Pisces feels like if we're going to look at this lunation from the perspective of confidence, which is a really important Aries thing, what kind of emotional blockages or emotional pains come along the way. And part of why I got the idea to talk about confidence, as like part of this eclipse, is that Aries, is this winner, this go getter, a champion, an athlete, a leader. And in order to begin new things, in order to take the leap, in order to have, courage, oftentimes, confidence is a really big key for that. And if we have impulses, creative instincts, and then we feel this kind of sense of fear or bracing or contraction, we'll kind of hold that back. And I'm also, I was noticing that in the days leading up to this lunation that I had this newfound confidence for certain things that really surprised me, and that I was also like newly shy or kind of like tender about things that normally aren't that way for me. And I thought that was really interesting because eclipses, have this kind of, the moon is literally, it's crossing over the sun, it's blocking the light of the sun. So there is a moment of maybe facing, our fear of the dark, like the lights just turned out, turned off. You're about to get on stage, you're about to do something that requires confidence, and suddenly all these, psychological materials come up. So I decided to reflect on confidence and different types of inhibitions that disrupt kind of what Aries is trying to do, and suggest like provide that as information for the new moon. And I would love to hear, yeah, how this lands for you and if you find it applicable to what you're currently experiencing. So, for one, there is a impetus during this, new moon cycle, this eclipse window to really kind of shift our relationship with our boldness, with our ability to take initiative, with our, ability to take a leap or to take risks. Whether we are kind of jumping out of the nest and letting ourselves do things that we used to be afraid of, whether we're addressing the underlying emotional root causes that are creating that fear, which can be a really kind thing to do. And also if we're maybe like the phrase, sorry, like letting ourselves like chicken out from a dare. Okay. And what I mean by that is like Aries can really push past boundaries or kind of like just go for things. And sometimes we can back down if we're scared. And I'm an Aries sun. So there's been plenty of times in my life where I've kind of had the willpower to do something that I was afraid of without checking in and going slow with myself, and that I've gotten went like way in over my head. That's been life-giving to me at certain points. It's been definitely an adventure. And other times I'm like, damn, that hurt. Like that really, really hurts. And at the same time, when I was thinking about inhibition and what heals inhibition, we're playing with fire here. This is a fire sign. And a lot of what the Aries experience is about is actually really deeply, there is a deep vulnerability in being the first, in being a pioneer, in being a trailblazer. These are all Aries keywords, but if we really slow down and feel into what they mean, this is a person who is going against, the norm or what the precedent has been. And so while there is naturally a type of confidence that even allows a person to go and follow that impulse and go ahead and lead, there are plenty of insecurities that go along with that. And there's also just the deep ouch of losing or falling flat on your face and being like, wow, that was embarrassing. And it's not the end of the world. And I think that there can be like if we really go within and have kind of like an internal soul deepening phase shift with this Aries lunation, I think it could be about fortifying our inner ability to take risks and deal with the consequences, right? To really kind of rewrite the ways that we internalize things about ourselves, make up stories about ourselves based on how things go, and basically start to become more smart about the war that's happening in our own heads, about who we are, what we're capable of, as opposed to controlling and like the attempt to control and manage how we, I guess, relate to our impulses and instincts, or how we're trying to control or manage the room. And I'll explain that a little bit as we go. But essentially, like, I am super deep into EFT, emotional freedom technique. I have been doing it for years, but I recently took a training that took things to a much deeper level. And as I combine it with all my astrological sight and my, work I already do with people, as I also am getting EFT sessions, doing EFT on myself, I'm really blown away by what's coming up. EFT, emotional freedom technique, is a gentle trauma healing technique where you are tapping on different points on your body and talking through things and basically disarming often long time trauma responses, chronic stress responses, that basically inhibit our freedom in some way. So if you have an immense amount of trepidation or fear about certain things, you will probably avoid them, right? So we kind of organize our personality in many ways to avoid feeling certain things, to avoid pain. And that if there is something that is trying to emerge, right? Aries is emergence, it is birth, it is beginning, right? So if there's something natural in the arc of your creative development as a human, as a soul that is trying to come through, but your kind of ego energetic system or trauma body is like, red alert, we can't go there. Like, it might be harder to have access to it. So those could be the conversations that you avoid having because they really stress you out, the decisions that you avoid making, situations you avoid putting yourself in entirely, etc. And what's really powerful about addressing this at an emotional level, such as through EFT, I do offer sessions, by the way, I'll talk about that more at the end. You can begin to process and alchemize the emotions, like the wave of life that's coming through in relationship to fears, and then have like a layer open and dissolve with that. So I want to think of a good example. Let's say that you have a creative project or you want to show up a certain way in the world, but you're really worried that you're going to look dumb or like look stupid. It would be basically neutralizing your fear of like, okay, well, what if you are stupid? Like tuning into the part of you that believes that, and beginning to work with that. as opposed to controlling how you're showing up in the outer environment so that you never dare to look dumb. So let me back up a little bit. I want to talk about some of these inhibitions with Aries and the Aries experience and just kind of open them up more at like an emotional level, what some of the patterns are, and some wisdom that I have about it in kind of a generalized way. And again, if you want support going deeper into something more personal, I do offer these types of sessions and coaching and whatnot. So, one of the first things that we could be coming up against is this not feeling like there's a guarantee that it will work out. Because actually, like the Aries power is really just deciding and choosing. It's I'm lit up about this. I'm passionate about it. Like I don't necessarily need a ton of validation or security. Like this is just the move. Like I feel this. This is the step I want to take. When we don't have confidence to take a leap, that can show up in the form of, well, I don't know how it's going to turn out. So why jump? But the whole point of Aries is the leap, right? Like success isn't already designed into the machinery, so to say. It's like actually a new adventure and we don't know where it's going to go. So there's a certain confidence in the ability to improvise as things develop, right? And this kind of inner confidence of like, I can do new things, I can be a pioneer. But I wanted to share like some perspective on this just archetypally that in the hero's journey, which is a very Aries thing, so the hero's journey as outlined by Joseph Campbell, there is that call to adventure, the spark that begins the heroic arc, the story. And there's usually, some trepidation or like, I don't know if I'm going to answer the call. And then events conspire to kind of like get you to be like, okay, I'm going to do it actually. But eventually, after we say yes to the adventure, mentors, guides, like circumstances align to support us. But that's the key, is that the protagonist, the main character, the hero said yes to the adventure that was unfolding. That decision, that initial spark is a mystical and powerful side of Aries, right? And so that kind of like chess game negotiation, like I'll say yes to the spark of new life when, the world promises me that it's going to work out for me. It's like, that's not how it works. So I wanted to share this quote that I've always really loved since I heard it. It goes like this: until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. Right? So providence meaning like the universe. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never have otherwise occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would come his way. I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. William Hutchinson Murray. So just those last few, he was quoting Goethe. And so the only caveat that I'll add to that is that the ruler of the lunation, because Aries, the whole point is just do it. It's not so serious. It's not so deep. Just do it. That, but there are some underlying deep psychological reasons why we're uninhibited. And so when I think about Mars in Cancer, trine Saturn in Pisces, if there's some emotional block, I think it can be kind to work with the emotional resistance and then take the action. right? And depending also, if you're someone that does a lot of processing and you want to build the skill to just do things without processing it a ton first, then maybe that is the phase shift or the leap. You can use your discernment because Aries has that ability to just kind of use force to do things. And I think that there's something about this lunation of, yeah, just do it, decide, and be on board at a deeper emotional level too. You can have one part of you that's jumping off the cliff and another part of you that's kicking and screaming in the background. And it's really powerful to work with the part that's kicking and screaming, because those are kind of parts of ourselves that sabotage or inhibit or whatnot. And we just keep neglecting them in some sense until we look and work with them. So, another inhibition, pain, fear kind of thing with Aries could be I might look bad, stupid, or ridiculous, like a fool, essentially. And it's like possible, but just according to what standards, right? What definition? So, where do I want to go with that? I want to share a story like a teaching metaphor, if you will. I had a childhood friend who was just really like off the wall, full of energy, playful, silly, talking in characters, being weird, laughing hysterically often, just very joyful, wild person. And she was just like not in the matrix in certain ways. Like she definitely could fit in the matrix, but just in terms of like how just like lit up in wildness and silliness she was, like she was definitely at a louder volume than everyone else. And so naturally kids will kind of pick, and notice what makes people different, and that can be a way to make fun of them. So people would make fun of her laugh, they would make fun of her teeth. And it was really fascinating, because I witnessed this over a dynamic or a time of years that she wouldn't let that in. When people tried to diminish her, make fun of her, she just really didn't care. And so there wasn't a way to like hook in any kind of spell or program of like there's something wrong with you, or like why are you so silly, why are you laughing so much, like you have a bad laugh, like none of that. She just continued to be in this extreme joy, and I've only seen her go on to have like a pretty extraordinary life, continuing to be in this like epic frequency of joy. She's just doing that. I mean, that's kind of like there's a sovereignty inside of that, right? It's a confidence. And what's interesting about it is that literally no one appointed it to her. Maybe it was some of her relationships with family members or whatnot, like could have helped anchor and support that in. But as far as peers were going, like she was getting resistance and flack for being the way that she was. And it's very easy from like a social organism mind kind of way to really just like take in the information of, oh, I expressed myself in this certain way and then people laughed at me. Therefore, that part of me is laughable. That part of me is stupid. Right. And then to internalize that bad feedback. And it's really subjective. And so we can take a good look, like be very self aware about if there's something innate, natural in us, right? We have these instincts, these impulses, like a certain way of being. Some of these things we've put into shadow because they have gotten bad feedback or disconnected us, right? And when it comes to taking action, being an initiative, like living our lives, we will experience opportunities to come back into contact with those parts of ourselves. And then also experience an inhibition of like, oh, I shouldn't be angry. Like a situation is coming up that's very clearly triggering our anger, but we shouldn't be angry. Like that's dangerous for me. Or, we want to be silly or goofy, or we've like, sometimes we just suppress those things so much that we don't even feel those impulses anymore. Right. And then we're working with depression or pain. And those are layers that we end up, having to be with. Um, the point here is that either way, being able to feel that sensation of like, oh, I am embarrassed, or what I just did is embarrassing. There's a certain resilience that we can have in our psyches and our animal body to basically burn in that heat of, oh, I'm humiliated, right? But then not make it mean something about us or how we need to behave or conform. And when we're behaving and conforming, we're essentially just trying to avoid feeling humiliated. So actually, the final boss in the video game is the feeling of humiliation. That's my point, which brings us back to Mars and Cancer, trine Saturn and Pisces, the malefics, trine and water signs. And again, final boss in the video game is just the feeling. So this was a fairly radical thing for me to consciously understand some years back, because as I started to open my erotic body, as I was doing embodiment practices, as I was coming into more contact with my life force energy, I began to notice that every time that I just popped out a little bit, expressing myself in ways that I wouldn't normally have let myself before, that this deep shame and humiliation would come up after of just like horrified that I had done that. And so I, worked with that for some time, and it still comes up in certain ways. But it's like learning the psychological intelligence about it, because you go from believing that, it's just like you're out, like living your life, having a moment, you let your inhibitions down for whatever reason, right? Maybe some true part of your soul essence came through, you expressed yourself, but then after the fact, there's this kind of contraction, or the expression never happens because the repression is so deep. So in terms of, the bad emotion being the final boss in the video game, as I started to contemplate, like, well, maybe there's an eroticism of humiliation, right? Because if I'm feeling embarrassed just for being myself, right? I started to notice that I was my own prison keeper, right? Criticizing my impulses, criticizing what my face looks like, how I talk, like whatever, And as I started to kind of soften that, it didn't mean I didn't get embarrassed. That still came up, but it's like, well, how can I greet this? How can I be with this? And I started to realize that it was actually just a really hot sensation, like the body heats up. And then during a moment of feeling humiliated, the mind likes to grab onto it and create all these stories, like never act that way. It was insane what you did. Don't be that way again, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what if we could just have heart inside of the experience of being fucking embarrassed, Like, I started to notice TV characters, notably during this time where I was thinking a lot about this. It was Davy in Never Have I Ever on Netflix. But just the way that she was doing things that were kind of bold, and that sometimes it really worked out for her, and other times it didn't. And she'd be super embarrassed, that kind of like, oh, I just need to crawl in a hole kind of feeling. But then she'd get back up and continue to live her life. It really struck me because I realized that I actually hadn't cultivated that resilience to embarrassment. And because I hadn't cultivated that resilience, I wasn't taking as many risks or really letting myself be spontaneous or improvisational, that I was stuck behind a little bit more of a control pattern, lest I do something embarrassing. So as we begin to liberate and free and kind of like step into that part of us that can take creative risks, Sun and Aries, right? That part of us that can step out and blaze new trails. It really, kind of rubs the Saturnian part of us who's learned like what the rules are, how to behave, how to not step out of line. It rubs that part of us like the wrong way. It just does. And so you end up feeling cringe. You end up feeling like what you're doing is embarrassing. And I don't really believe that confidence itself is a defense from feeling that way. It certainly helps, right? But like puffing yourself up and pretending to be confident, I don't think is even the full thing. I think being able to have like a deeper, loving self relationship with the parts of ourselves that are feeling these really difficult emotions that our personality is wired to avoid is like the real power move. So, in summation, here with the fear of looking stupid, looking like a fool, we just have to examine how deeply this prevents us from living and feeling. And if the burn of exposure and embarrassment isn't a worthwhile admission fee to a freer life. And as I was saying at the beginning, it doesn't mean you just have to like jump headfirst into something that you know is really embarrassing for you. But like, if there's something on the horizon, right, like a way that you want to be speaking your truth more, or like a moment coming up that you might feel more exposed, like a speaking engagement, or whatever it is, like that is kind of on the horizon in your own hero's journey, where if it goes wrong, you might look bad. Like, what I'm saying is, it could be so much more powerful to alchemize that at an emotional level rather than try to make sure that no matter what, that doesn't happen. Right. Like I'm really into Madeline Moon's work lately. I love her book, Artist of Love. I'm listening to it currently. And she had just posted a reel about like, are you trying to not feel cringe again? Never mind, just try again, be cringe. Like, the fear of not being cringe is killing your spontaneity and your range, right? So it's like Aries being the fool, taking the leap, a confidence inside of that that includes making mistakes, falling on your face, feeling dumb. And I know that that's really hard and really deep and really tender. And sometimes there's trauma material in that, and it's not just a mindset shift. And there's actually some like really deep, tender elements of that. And so, not feeling like you just have to tough up and do hard things. Like, we do have to do hard things, but also deeper emotional healing and taking responsibility for our emotional healing and trauma healing and whatnot, so that we have more capacity to be with these pains of, say, feeling embarrassed. These all go so deep. These are very, like, there's something very primal about it, right? Um, the other one could be the fear of being criticized or punished by people, or kind of exiled, like I won't belong anymore. And so for that one, that in actuality, like expressing yourself attracts mixed attention, positive attention, um, people that like it, people that celebrate it, as well as negative attention in the form of criticism or judgment, jealousy, um, people being triggered. And if you like, if part of your creative expression has involved liberation, right? Like if you've gone through this kind of alchemical process of loosening shame's grip on you and your spontaneity and your energy, right? That you've liberated some kind of core part of your essence that was always told was too much or is wrong or something like that. And it's actually just who you are. When you let that out, it has a very bright, like, impact, including people loving it, but also people being like, how dare you express the thing that you just liberated yourself from an internal prison around that I'm still in? Like, how dare you express that? Which means that if you are going to step outside of the mold or step outside of the cultural matrix of belonging, that there's something very martial and Aries about that, in the sense that you also kind of end up having to defend the throne, right? Defend your sovereignty. And not necessarily by engaging with people that want to detract from you, but like the friend from childhood that I was describing earlier, her throne was defended epically, right? She just was immune to people trying to degrade or belittle her. And so it's realizing that if you express yourself, right, if you step out, you are not guaranteed positive reception from the world at large and from everyone. And so that is something like a kind of strength, a fortitude that becomes asked of us. And I just wanted to name too that as I was thinking about that, um, I felt very American, like American in the sense of I was always conditioned with this idea that I could become whoever I wanted, that I could like move far away from home, that I could be independent. And now I'm living in like rural Greece and I meet people from different countries so much more. And I think that in some countries and some rural areas, stepping way out of how the community behaves does not feel as accessible an option as it might feel to me and my like American psyche. And I suppose it's like why I bring that up. The hero's journey, or kind of like it involves something about separating from the community, from the village, if you will, like going on this adventure and coming back and integrating. And for some people, that full journey of return to the community that you once left behind is possible. And for some people, the community's limitations are so severe that there isn't like a reconciliation that happens at some point. And that can be in America or anywhere else, really. But it's like in Aries, right? If we're like the whole endeavor is to step out, to pioneer. And in some cultural contexts, that is like kind of celebrated, or maybe it's hated, but it's just like having haters. It's not like having threats of violence or something like that. In some cultural contexts, it's more like heavily restricted or punished in extremely severe ways. And the impulse, right? Like all of that kind of energy that needs to, I guess, express or wants to individuate for those that feel that, either they have to break away from such constraints by whatever means, even if geographical distance, or there's kind of like an internalization of all that energy, right? And a pain that goes along with that. So on the one hand, moving away from social conformity, the stakes are different depending on what situation you find yourself immersed in. But I think that the Aries, like the kind of martial quality to it is the same-ish, right? Archetypally. Anyways, my point being with all that, to wrap that up, is that the experience of leaving community in order to individuate can be like extremely dangerous, right? Or it can be a psychological thing where it feels like a survival threat when it isn't. And Aries at the same time possesses such a desire for independence that there is an escape velocity to leave, the false comforts of belonging or false community and realize, like, I actually don't want to do this with all of you anymore. Like, this is not my jam. Like, I don't want to be here. I'm going to bounce. And that there is an incredible loneliness or vulnerability with that. And it is another form of taking a leap into the mystery where unknown friends, allies, support find us when we've taken such leaps. And so the opposite sign of Aries, Libra, is going to be more about peacemaking and relationship skills and working through things. Aries has an impetus for separating and severing and moving toward a goal, right? And so those kind of plot moments where there is a familiarity or something that I'm embedded in that I need to cut or sever myself away from, right? Or even in relationships that are lasting, that aren't ending, it might be a pattern inside of the relationship of I can't do this pattern or this dance with you anymore. Like, I'm pattern breaking this. Like, we need to take a leap into something else. And just how viscerally uncomfortable it feels to at a survival level, to leave behind that familiar matrix. And yet that is what Aries feels tasked to do. Because it's eclipse season, I think there can also be those moments where it's our impulse to run and we realize, like, oh, there is actually something workable here. I don't have to cut, I don't have to sever. But that could be the kind of mystery of, like, am I supposed to cut ties and move on? Or is there something deeper I can work in relationship and in connection here? One other, it's like this transmission is like heavy even for me, just to think about like the emotional things that are blocking the kind of Aries impulse and freedom. But the last one I want to mention is this idea of not feeling capable. And I want to name that, like, if this is a neutral statement of like, oh, I don't have the skill yet, I need to engage a learning process, train, and then move on with it, then that's great. There's no emotional problem or issue there. And we probably have those areas of our lives where we can just soberly assess, like, I don't have the skill, but I have the willpower to get the skill and then move on with my life. And it's like no drama, not a big deal. It's when it's a pain point of like, I can't do it, that I want to unpack some of what might be happening. So part of it is that, like, there's this Pisces stellium with Saturn in the North Node, Neptune, Venus, and then Mars in Cancer. So maybe there's some very lofty vision, a big ideal, and a lofty ideal or vision could motivate us. It could be, this dream that we are like living in the temple of every day, and we're like, yeah, just getting closer to our dream, and it's like beautiful. But if there's some kind of pain in it, or it's like filled with a lot of anguish, or like holding the dream, but we don't think we can have it, there's likely a disparity between where we are and then this higher dream or ideal. And that we've created this inverted pedestal where we are like so inferior in connection to this big thing that we want or dream of, right? Or the moment of time that we're in is inferior. I thought of a metaphor with it of like that cringe, that embarrassment feeling of feeling like you're in a remedial art class, but you feel like you wish you were just in a museum. that like your work was like in galleries and stuff, and that it feels embarrassing to be in the art class. And objectively speaking, like where we are is just where we are. It's our judgment and a kind of self critique because of an ideal and like a punishment internally of like where you are isn't good enough, etc. And I would be mindful of that, right? Like a type of, I was talking about embracing humiliation, but now I'm talking about embracing humility in terms of having a sober, loving, compassionate relationship to where we are starting from and nurturing that willpower that we have to take a next step, like a next step on the mountain that gives us a foothold so that we can get to another place or to engage the learning process, to engage the skill building process. And that simply that kind of cringe factor, if we have an ego attachment to being excellent, to being amazing, to being fantastic, and then we can't look at the parts of ourselves where we could use some more skill, we might tend to kind of avoid growth experiences and try to just specialize or focus on where we already feel kind of talented or capable. And being new at something, like not being good at something, there's a natural kind of like beginner's mind and humility. And when we are overly identified with needing things to be amazing or perfect or ideal, we can start to develop this allergy or cringe to just being with where we are in a particular area if we feel like we're amazing or excel at something else. And I think that, the heaven or the ideal that we imagine in being somewhere farther along than where we are, it's an illusion. It's an illusion, right? The dream happens in fractals of time in the present moment. I think there's a lot of spiritual teachings like this of like, you don't get to the aligned results by being out of alignment the whole time. So finding the self-appreciation, the kind of chop wood, carry water beauty in the mundane of the process, I think will help that kind of pain point, of I'm not capable, I feel inferior, etc. Because it could just be a neutral, like, yeah, I'm not good at this and I'm like working on it. It's not a big deal. If it hurts, if it's a pain point, that's where I think it's worth letting ourselves off of the hook of these fantasy expectations and getting much more intimate and self-loving with ourselves where we are. And inside of that, we can continue to have that Aries ambition and want to get to a higher place or want to be successful or want to achieve our goals and all of that. But without the emotional self-flagellation and extra pain. So that's what I have for you about the Aries eclipse. I wanted to explore these kind of emotional things, unpack them a little bit, because I think that just saying, just go for it, just do it, isn't enough, even though it's a great sentiment. And that it's about maybe a phase shift in emotional maturity and emotional development, as well as the maturation of our will, right? Like that part of us that where we access that kind of fire and that willingness to move in a direction or move toward a goal. And in reality, how it is hard to do things. It is hard to, things can be pleasurable, we can enjoy, we can have fun, but building things, moving past our limitations, like chasing a dream, like there are hard things about it. And it's very easy to get discouraged. And I think that there is a phase shift. There is a kind of initiatory process that's happening right now. And this is happening through whatever challenges we're currently experiencing, to initiate like a deeper level of maturity of our emotions and of our willpower to engage that spark of life that we came here with, or that spark of life within us that is willing to move in a direction, the part of us that is connected to our instincts and impulses. A sprout that is coming out of the ground, right? A new little plant, like our new ideas, the fresh parts of ourselves, they can be very vulnerable, right? Like they're not established yet. They don't have like a track record. They don't have a reputation. They don't have a lot of like feedback or knowledge of cause and effect. And it can be very easy to repress our instincts or repress that emergent life force within us because we haven't built that kind of trust and we haven't learned how to nurture it. And so I think while being able to have the affect of confidence, to behave as a confident person, while that kind of like theater is in of itself a glamour, I think there is something about this lunation that's asking for a deeper cut, a deeper foundation of confidence. And that it is not one that is about running away from our pain or our fears, but learning how to embrace our complexity and totality, and still show up for the process. So thanks for tuning in with me. I do have EFT and astrology sessions. I'm getting my website working so that I can have like pages where I describe what my offerings are instead of talking about them in the videos. But I would suggest signing up for my mailing list to know about when my books are open and to get my written word and me describing the offerings and whatnot. And then also the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is coming up May 6th. Applications are open now. This is a profound, amazing course to become like a seer, to become fluent in evolutionary astrology. A lot of people come to me, come to studying astrology. Maybe they haven't studied formally before with an actual teacher or mentor, like they're book learned, listening to podcasts and whatnot. And when that happens, you kind of have all these disparate pieces, but you don't know how to approach it as a whole body of knowledge or how to have your own intuitive relationship with it. So this course, the vision and the offering of it is that you learn the individual parts of how to approach a natal chart from this lineage specifically, which is about the soul. The signs, the planets, etc. aspects, but that you learn how to see it as a whole and also how to have your own relationship ongoingly with the archetypes such that you have your very own, creative muse, that you're having your own gnosis, that you're getting your own downloads, and that this art really becomes alive for you. Not just information from a book, not just information that you have to collect or memorize, but that you are immersed into what it actually is, which is a living practice of connecting to the cosmos, right? Like these energies are very alive. They are happening in our own lives, in our inner worlds, in relationship, in the world around us. And when we tune in at that deeper level of developing our own channel with this craft, the sky, life speaks to us, our direct experiences influence our philosophy. Our philosophy expands what we can experience. It is an amazing feeling. Like coming into this class, it's not just about learning how to read natal charts as a whole or speaking astrology for yourself. Studying these archetypes, learning this language will open doors you didn't even imagine were there. You'll be taken on your own unique journey and curriculum of what it is that the sky wants to tell you. And you get to do that in a cohort with very deep, sincere, wonderful people. Because if you haven't noticed, like the way I talk on this channel is kind of esoteric, and the class really calls in people that are sensitive, deep, magical, sincere people. And you'll have the guidance and reflection from me. I tune in with my students. I really care to get to know you and track how things are going for you in class. So yeah, it's really an incredible, like really, really up there astrology program. You can follow the link in the notes to learn more about it, to read student testimonials, and to apply. So we're beginning May 6th. That's not that far away in actuality. So go ahead and check out the link and apply. And remember to like this video if you haven't already and to let me know what you thought. Thank you. Sending you all so much love. And I hope that your emergences and what's new in your life is really blessed and supported.